verses here to, on my heart this week, and I thought about and prayed about. Don't know exactly which way to go with it this morning, but want to follow God. But it comes after after the crucifixion, comes after the resurrection, and there's a lot of things that happened after Jesus rose from the grave. There was a whole lot of people saw him, and he was here upon this earth even after he rose from the grave, quite a few days. But I guess everybody's familiar with this morning. I'm going to read it here in John, and it's the 20th chapter of John. But it's talking about Thomas. And we all know the story of Thomas and what he said and these different things during this time. But just listen this morning. We may not say nothing from it this morning, but just listen. It says, and after 8 days again, his disciples were within, and Thomas with them. Then came Jesus, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst, and said, Peace be unto you. Then saith he to Thomas, Reach hither thy finger, and behold my hand, and reach hither thy hand, and thrust it into my side. And be not faithless, but believing. And Thomas answered and said unto him, My Lord and my God. Jesus saith unto him, Thomas, because thou hast seen me, thou hast believed. Blessed are they that have not seen and yet have believed. I'm going to stop there. There's a lot in that as far as the reading of it goes in this. But we see how Thomas, he told them there beforehand, he said, I'll not believe it. They told him Jesus was here. He'd done been seen by all the rest of the disciples and whatnot. And he said, Thomas said, I'll not believe it unless I put my fingers in the prints in his hands, unless I am there to see that in his side and whatnot. He says, I'll not believe it. Thomas is like most of the world today. They believe that Jesus was alive and died, but a lot of them don't believe that he rose from the grave. But Thomas said, I ain't going to believe that. That's a bunch of foolishness. We're just putting it in our words today. I'm not going to believe that. There's no point in it. They didn't have the funeral and all that. I ain't going to believe that. But this morning, I want you to know something, that when we see Christ as he is this morning, I believe one of these days after a while, we'll see him just exactly as he is. We'll see the prints in his hands, I believe. I believe we'll see the mark on his side. And you say, Preacher, that's crazy. He showed it to Thomas, didn't he? He showed it to him after he died and after he rose from the grave. But he went on and Jesus told him, he said, you've seen because you believe. You've seen because, or you believe because you've seen me. He said, but blessed are those that have not seen and yet have believed. And I think about what it was as we think about Jesus Christ standing there before the disciples. What was it? What was it that convinced them? Was it his face, or was it this, that, and that? It'd be hard this morning to be convinced in our carnal minds that somebody had rose from the grave. We'd think we'd saw this and saw that, and maybe we's going crazy or anything like that, but it'd be, our carnal mind wouldn't want to have that thing. Wouldn't want to believe in that thing. But you see, the carnal mind, the Bible teaches us, is at enmity against God. It doesn't like the things of God. In other words, it's at war against God. It doesn't believe in the things of God. It says it's impossible for one to raise from the grave, the carnal mind says. But the Bible teaches me that with God all things are possible. With Him, all things are possible this morning. And so, as we look at what Thomas saw, he saw the marks in Jesus. He saw the marks of the crucifixion. He saw the marks of he saw the marks of how they drove the nails into his hands and into his feet. He saw the marks of how that Roman soldier had thrust that spear into his side. He saw the marks of love. And that's what them marks represent to us this morning. As that crucifixion ought to represent to us the love of God and the love of Jesus Christ. Because the Bible tells us as Jesus went to the cross, He was obedient unto the cross, obedient even unto the death of the cross, but He also despised the shame of the cross. But He went to that cross because of the love that He had for each and every one of us here this morning. It wasn't anything that anybody paid Him to do or even begged Him to do or anything like that. It was just simply because He loved us. He loved us before we even knew who we were. And because of that same love this morning, He bears those marks. He carries those marks. You think about it, as a kid growing up, as a little boy, there's many times that I'd fall or fall off of something, or I'd wreck a bicycle or whatever it may have been, and make a little scar on me. And some of them scars I still bear with me today that are still on my body that happened a long time ago when I was these little youngins' age. That's still there, and it still carries on. And so what Jesus marks represent to us this morning, it represents a love, an unending, an undying, an ever unstoppable love that He has for each and every one of us, for He has for this entire world this morning. It's what He desired to show to each and every one of us as He carries on. And you say, well, preacher, we can't see Him. We don't see Him as Thomas saw Him back yonder. We don't see Him just the same way as the disciples saw Him back yonder. They looked upon Him with their eyes and saw Him, and that's why they believed. We ought to look a little deeper this morning. As the Bible tells us that Jesus, as He went up into the heavens there, He left us something behind, and that something is that sweet Spirit of God. It's that Holy Ghost, that Comforter that teaches us and always points us to the things of Christ. It'll never turn you away from Christ. It comforts us in the midnight hours. It shows us that the love of God is more important than anything else this morning. That sweet Spirit this morning is left behind for us to show us the mark of the way this morning of Jesus Christ. We say, preacher, that ain't no mark to me. Well, this morning go on to salvation. And what does salvation do to you? As we got saved at whatever age or whatever time we got saved, maybe we find that when we got up, things was different than they used to was. What do you mean they's different, preacher? What do you mean they was different? I didn't have any marks on me. The marks that we carry through salvation are inside of us, because the Bible teaches us that He had wrote His laws, His ways upon our hearts this morning. That's a mark that the church carries down through time. As long as it's here on this side, as long as it's upon this earth, the mark that the church carries is inside of us, and that mark is to show the rest of the world Jesus Christ. So you say, preacher, how in the world can I be like they was back then? Children, I'm going to tell you something. We look to marks a lot in our life. As you go and you go traveling, you look to the old road sign, the marker sign they used to call them, looking for the way to go and whatnot. You'll go down one road and there'll be a sign saying you need to turn on another road. And it's a guide, it's a lamp post. It's something to show you which way that you need to head in life. And that's what the church ought to be, children, as we find that old Moses back yonder and the children of Israel. We find he went down there to Pharaoh, and he told Pharaoh, God said, let my people go. And God told Pharaoh to go time and time, or told Moses to go time and time again. And we find Moses went and was obedient unto God. And we find that eventually Pharaoh told him, said, go on, get out of here. We don't want you here anymore. Just leave, so that all this turmoil, these pestilences, these plagues, and all this will be over. Just get out of here. And so they left, and they crossed over that Red Sea, children, and they got down yonder in that wilderness, and they hadn't left behind the things of the world that was behind them. They hadn't walked and followed after God. Maybe they did for a little while. Maybe they went on and believed and said they believed for a little while until their fleshly lust got to catching up to them, until the things in their natural bodies got to catching up to them. And then they said, no, I want them back yonder. I want what I had back yonder over there in Egypt. I want the garlic and the leeks. I had bread over yonder. They didn't desire the things of God, children. And so they would end up time after time. They'd end up time after time having a mark placed upon them. What do you mean a mark? Well, there's many of them lost their lives down yonder in the wilderness, children. There's many of them would die in the wilderness because of the things that they've done. We say, well, I ain't going to die in the wilderness, preacher. I've been saved. Well, I'm going to tell you something this morning. Salvation is deliverance. That's what it is this morning. It delivers you from a place called hell, and it takes you to a place called heaven, where you can go boldly to the throne of grace, where God himself is at, where Jesus Christ is at. There's a whole lot of the world this morning. They know the words. They know the word, the name of Jesus Christ, but they've never called upon it. They know and how they ought to go and what they ought to follow, but they never fell in the tracks of that old way, children. And that's what happened back yonder with the children of Israel. God gave them a marker, and I believe that marker was Moses. He gave them a marker to follow after, a pillar of light, if you will, this morning. And they wouldn't follow after him. And so we find they died in the wilderness, all except for Caleb and Joshua back yonder. And we find that they continued. Joshua and Caleb would cross over that river Jordan. And you know what happened then as they crossed over? They had that old Ark of the Covenant, children. And God told them to let that Ark of the Covenant pass over before the rest of you. That old Ark of the Covenant goes knee-deep there in that river Jordan. As it goes in that river Jordan, and Joshua give them orders. He said, tell them to stop there. Right in the middle. Tell them I want them to stop. Right there, dead in the middle of it. As they stopped in that river Jordan, the waters became silent. They stopped there, and he told the children of Israel, now I want you to go across. Go on across. Go on across over to the Canaan land, that promised land. Go on across there. Now go down yonder where the priests are at, where the markers are at, and I want you to get 12 stones from beneath their feet. Right smack dab in the middle of the river Jordan. I want you to get 12 stones. And I want you to take them over here, and I want you to place them for a memorial. You make a sign, a marker. I want everybody to know that the children of Israel came out of Egypt way back yonder 40-some years ago and has crossed over into the land that God has promised them. I want them to remember this. The Bible said, so that when the children would come up, that they would look upon that and they would know that they've been told. In other words, that, hey, our fathers, our forefathers, they came over from Egypt and they went over right here. It was a history to them, children. And we've got that same history today, that history of salvation, that marker in our lives that maybe mamas and papas or aunts and uncles has gone all through their life, and they've been a signpost for us, a marker of what it means to be saved, to see Jesus inside of them children. And that's what we are called to do when our youngins ask us about Jesus Christ. When our little people ask us about salvation and what it means, children, it's time to stand still and be a marker. Be willing to tell them of what we went through, a testimony, if you will. In this day and time, people ain't willing to get to the point of telling about their salvation. They think, well, it's all up to God. If He tells me to do it, I'll do it. Children, I'm going to tell you, if you want to have a desire to do something for God, you'll get down on your knees and get where that God can use you, and then God will give it to you. You see, it takes us being willing. If Moses hadn't been willing to walk from back yonder, from that burning bush, all the way down there to Pharaoh, and call upon Pharaoh, and been willing to be obedient unto God, and be that marker out yonder in the wilderness, then people never would have been delivered. But because Moses was willing, did he fall short in the middle of it? Of course he did, but he always repented, the Bible teaches us. And so we find this evening, or this morning, that the Bible calls us to be a marker. How so, preacher? How am I supposed to bear the marks of Christ? Paul back yonder, he told them that in the Word of God that he bore the marks of Christ. Now we find old Paul was whipped and all these things. He was left for dead, all these different things, and yet he continued on, children. And yet we live in a day and time where the sniffles gets us out of doing anything for God. We say, I don't feel like it. And I think so much about Christ on Calvary's cross. I'd say he didn't feel like it up there on that cross. But yet he said, it's not my will, but thy will be done. I'd say he didn't feel like it on that cross when he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I'd say he didn't feel like it on that cross when he said, I thirst. Oh, I'd say he didn't feel like it on that cross when he had a thief on either side of him chirping in his ear. Oh, what's that mean this morning? Oh, that's the world and that's the saved this morning on either side of Christ. You got some hollering upon Christ just like that one guy did, that thief did. And he's saying, hey, come down and save thyself and us too. Only worried about himself. Won't you save yourself and then pull us down there too? Save thyself and us too. And then you got that, you see, that's the laws today. That's what the world's after. The world is after the pride of life and all these different things. It's only out to save itself and to get through the next moment in its life. But that's what I believe this morning that thief represented when he said, come down and save thyself and us too, children. But on the other side, he represented what salvation's all about, I believe. He said, rememberest thou me when thou enterest into thy kingdom. He said, he told that other one, he said, we've been rightly condemned for what we've done. We're up here because we've done wrong. We're up here because we've sinned against God. We're up here because we deserve to be up here. But Jesus, this man, he's done nothing. And so I said, rememberest thou me when thou enterest into thy kingdom. Children, Jesus told him, he said, today thou shalt be with me in paradise. He didn't tell it to the one on the other side. He didn't tell him, you're going to be in paradise today. But he told the one that said, rememberest thou me when thou enterest into thy kingdom. Children, that's a marker, not to follow after the things of the world, but yet to follow after the things of Christ.
This morning we got to press toward the mark. And that mark this morning is Jesus Christ. That mark is inside of us as a church to continue on. How do you mean that? You think of the church as a marker. I guess everybody in Hancock County knows where New Hope Baptist Church is at this morning. But how many's gathered out here this morning? How many's willing to come and be obedient unto God? I'm going to tell you, children, every church around ought to have a place filled up with the people of God in these trying and dangerous and scary times. Oh, calling out unto God. But yet you find that there's only a few that are willing. There's only a few that come. There's only a few that I actually believe and trust in God and know that all things are made by Him and for Him. And without Him, not anything is made, children. I'm telling you something this morning, that we are the church. If we've been saved and we're called to be that marker, we're called to be that lamppost, we're called to be that light. What's a light do for you in the darkness? It gives you something to guide you to it where you can see. It guides you out of the darkness and into the light. A light out here on this road in the midnight hour will guide you along this road and take you where you want to go, children. And He's told us to be a light, a city that's set upon a hill that cannot be hid. What's that mean, preacher? To be a city that is set upon a hill that cannot be hid. You think about being out yonder in the times, over yonder across the waters in Jerusalem or wherever it may have been. They built a big old city up upon a hill, and you was out yonder in the desert, and you was looking for what? There wasn't no roads much. There wasn't no paths much. There wasn't nothing to really follow after, no markers much left along the way. But now you come through the middle of that desert and you see a city up on a hill, you'll recognize that city. It's a marker to you, children. And that's what we're called to be this morning as we go on to be the church. It takes a willing people. The Bible teaches me. Jesus said, hey, my people are a willing people. And that's what we're called to be this morning. I'm thankful for the few that come and are willing. I'm sorry for those that ain't. It fears me and scares me and makes me wonder. It's not for me to call upon or judge to say who's saved and who's lost. But now, children, I'm going to tell you something. There's a dedication that comes with serving God. There's a dedication that comes with salvation that you never forget. What do you mean, preacher? Because those marks are inside of you. His laws are inside of your heart. That conscience, I believe, is set up. And it's set up inside of you. I may not, before I was saved, I may have not known everything that I done wrong. But I can guarantee you this. Every time that I've sinned against God, every time that I've committed a sin, I know that right just as soon as I was doing it, because I believe God had set something up inside of me to tell me the difference between right and wrong, what I should be doing and what I hadn't ought to be doing. You see, that's the mark of God this morning. And so what kind of markers are we leaving for these young'uns as we go through life? What kind of signposts are we leaving? There's many a person leaving behind, or many a church, I say, leaving behind their tradition, man-made ways. Man-made ways that have you happen to have church on the inside of this building here this morning. Man-made ways says you can't have church any other way. You just will cancel and forget about it and go to the house and stay and watch televisions and all these things. Anything gets your mind off God. A man-made religion will tell you that, hey, you can't be saved out yonder in a pasture field. You can't be saved over here, over there. But I'm telling you, the church this morning was called to go out in the highways and the hedges and compel them to come in. He sent his disciples out yonder. He told them, go out. he told them as they's out yonder in that boat out there off the seashore of Tiberias, they toiled all night and they hadn't caught nothing. He hollered out there, he said, "Hey, Peter, hey, have you caught any meat?" He said, "No, we ain't caught no meat." He said, "Cast your nets down on the right side of the ship. Get on the right side and you'll catch some. Get on the right side and you'll be where you ought to be." He told them another place, and he asked them if they caught anything, and he told them, and they said, "No." He said, "Launch out into the deep. You can't get what you're after up here next to the shore. You can't get all you'll catch. You ever been fishing? Oh, you'll catch a lot of times around the shore. You'll catch them little fingerlings, we call them. You'll catch them if you're out there fishing. Them little bitty old men are looking things next to the shore. But now if you want something big and out yonder, you're going to get out there where you need to be, where the big fish can run a little deeper, or they can feed a little stronger." And he told them, he said, "Launch out into the deep, children." That's what it takes for the church in this day and time, I believe. It's time to launch out. It's time for us to get out and get about being the markers, get about being the signposts, get about the work that God has set forth for us to do. For time is running out. He said, "My spirit will not always strive with man." He told us one of these days after a while that he'd call his church home, and how the dead in Christ shall rise first, and those of us which are alive and remain shall be caught up to meet him in the air, and there shall we ever be. He taught us about what would happen to those that were lost and undone, and how they go through all these different things, all these tribulations and whatnot. Children, I'm telling you something. Today is the day of salvation. Time is running out for our people. Time is coming to an end, whether you have it or not. Man will say we can slow it down, we can even stop it. But I'll tell you that man was created by God, and God caused man to live. So you need not think that God can overrule man and say, "I'm putting an end to it," and step out and send his son down here to declare time no more, children, because he's the one that created the heavens and the earth. Oh, but he set us as a church a signpost up yonder. He set us a marker up yonder in the heavens, up yonder in that place that Jesus went to prepare for us. It's up there in a place that one of these days we'll get there, and it's our home, children. It's a place up yonder, a marker. What's that marker? That same marker that Thomas saw when Jesus said, "Touch my hands and thrust your hand into my side." That same marker is up yonder in the heavens, seated at the right hand of the Father. He's not dead, he's alive. And one of these days he's coming back to reclaim his church and take us home. And that same marker we find is the reason there'll be no night, because the Bible said there'll always be a sun there. Not the sun you see up yonder in the sky, but the S-U-N, the Son of the living God. The one that Thomas saw there as he said, "My Lord and my God." Children, I'm going to tell you something. It's time we get back to the old signpost. It's time this world, the church, all of this land and country gets back to being what the church ought to be. A church ought to be this morning more than one that just gathers together. A church is called to be more than one that just comes and gets together with each other. A church is called to be a light to a lost and dying world, seeking to save that which is lost, having the mind of Christ, going out here to these highways and hedges, compel them to come in. It's not about the size of a crowd, children, but it's about the lost that we can see saved. It's about those that we can help, because one of these days, after a while, whether you'll have it or not, If I leave here tonight, if I'll leave this world tonight, I can't help anybody else. I ain't nothing else I can do. My work is done, children. I can't help the lost. I can't help my lost children any longer. If I die tonight, it's all over for John. His work is over. And so this morning, that's why our part of life here on this earth, as the Bible says, is but a vapor in time, is so precious, children. It's so precious because you got a short span of time to do a huge work in that little span of time to see the lost saved. And so Jesus said to Thomas, he said, behold, Thomas, here, I touched the prints of my hand. Look here, I put your fingers in there, Thomas. I want you to feel them. Thrust your hand in my side, Thomas. In other words, look at the marks, Thomas. You know what they done, Thomas. You know they drove nails through my hands and feet, Thomas. You know that Roman stuck that spear into my side and out come blood and water, Thomas. You know what marks it left, Thomas. So go ahead if that's what it takes for you to believe. But you'll have to believe by the marks, Thomas. But Christ said, blessed are they that have not seen and yet have believed. Children, none of us have seen God today. None of us have seen Jesus Christ face to face. None of us have seen all that, children. But summers in our life, we've seen the marks of Christ in somebody else's life. We've seen it, how they've lived, how they've worshiped, what they believed,